G'day, thanks for joining me. What these videos are about are places that you can visit in Australia using your four-wheel drive that not everyone goes to and are certainly worth visiting. So today we're going to look at Ruby Gap in the East MacDonalds in the Northern Territory of Australia. Now I'll go through what I wrote for an article in Overlander some years ago. However, if you stay till the end, I'll tell you a few tricks on what we did to take the photos for that story. So Ruby Gap is a very special place indeed. It is remote, difficult to get to, has spectacular scenery, and was described in 1886 as a range studded with rubies and garnets. If you go there expecting to find financial riches, you'll be sorely disappointed. But in every other aspect, Ruby Gap is definitely worth visiting. Located 150 kilometres east of Alice Springs in the East MacDonald Ranges, access to Ruby Gap is off the Binns Track via Altunga. Binns Track starts at Mount Dare, heading north up via Alice Springs and covering over 2,100 kilometres before finishing up at Timber Creek. Following it is a great way to see many of the lesser known and less visited attractions in the Northern Territory. To follow the whole of the Binns Track, you'd require at least 12 days, but longer would be better to enjoy all the areas along the way. At Altunga Historical Reserve, there is a turn-off to the west towards Ruby Gap. While the gravel track at Napa is quite good, it deteriorates as soon as you get to the creek crossing. From here, the track is definitely high clearance four-wheel drive territory and is fairly slow going. The track varies from being soft and sandy to rough and rocky, with some areas of rock ledges to negotiate. Although it requires slower speeds to negotiate the track, the scenery is spectacular, with intensely red cliffs interspersed with weathered, lighter coloured hills. The vegetation adds to the beauty of the area, with shades of silver and grey to dark green and olive. There are some small, normally dry creeks to cross. Some have towering ghost gums overhead, which make for fabulous contrast with their ghost-like white trunks against the rich red of the nearby cliffs. These trees feature in many Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, and parts of the ghost gum were used by some Indigenous people to treat colds. It was in March 1886 that David Lindsay, a surveyor exploring the area north of Dalhousie Springs, travelled through the East MacDonalds, looking for pastoral potential. He made a note in his diary that he would return to prospect for rubies, which studded the rocks of the area. But when Lindsay got back to Adelaide, he applied for mineral leases over the area, but was surprised to learn that a member of his recent expedition had already granted leases over the best areas. By May 1887, there were over 200 prospectors, hoping to make their fortune by finding rubies. Unfortunately for the prospectors of the day, the rubies were found to be only high-quality garnets, which had nowhere near the value of rubies. The first mining rush in Central Australia was over not long after it began. Many of the disappointed prospectors moved 45 kilometres to the west to look for gold that had been discovered near Paddy's Rock Hole in 1887. At its height, Altunga, which was Central Australia's first official town, supported up to 300 people. The gold mining in the area lasted until 1913, with Altunga now a ghost town. Since the prospectors left, a few fences have been built, but what you see when you get to Ruby Gap National Park is pretty much what it looked like in the 1880s. At the entrance to the park, there is an information board about the area. It warns that flash flooding may occur after heavy rain, stating, "If you're in the river and it starts to pour, get out fast." Very good information to know, especially that the river is usually impassable for up to 2 months after it starts flowing. Once the entry signs are passed, the track immediately crosses the sandy Hale River, then takes a sharp left through the fence, which marks the park boundary. From here, the track follows along the side of the river, then crosses it a couple of times, so best to have four-wheel drive engaged and to reduce your tyre pressures. I actually didn't reduce my tyre pressures early enough and did get bogged. However, once I reduced it, I was able to drive out quite easily. It's also good to stay to the track and avoid any danger areas of sand, as these have been known to mark quicksand. where a vehicle may quickly get bogged and it be extremely difficult to retrieve. The river may be flowing underground, which creates these boggy areas. As the track turns north-east and the cliffs start to get close to the river, there is a high grass-covered area with ghost gums, shading some excellent campsites. Camping is allowed anywhere along the river from the park entrance up to Glen Gorge. There are many great campsites along this 7k of river, although the last two are very difficult to get to in a vehicle. Further on, the track climbs out of the river, then drops down again to cross it out the other side. The further you travel up the track, the more difficult it becomes. At 5 kilometres past the park entrance, there is a sign that vehicles are not recommended past this point. Given that this is a remote part of the Red Centre, it is good to heed the warning, as recovery if things go wrong is going to be extremely difficult and probably very expensive. Now this is a good spot to get out of the vehicle and walk up Glen Gorge. From here it is about 2-hour or 6 kilometre return. Here there are two very distinct rock types, with slabs of grey rock lining the riverbed and cliffs of red rising vertically above the river. It is very easy to find garnets in the sand, which gave rise to the ruby rush of the 1880s. If you walk to the other end of the Glen Gorge, you may be able to find Fox's grave. He was a prospector that found the conditions all too difficult and didn't make it out alive. Being so remote, some of the other prospectors fashioned a headstone out of a flat river rock, making inscriptions with their digging tools, although this has been difficult to find in recent times. There are often clear waterholes within Glen Gorge that may look inviting when the weather is warm, but they could be still very cold even in the height of summer, but very refreshing. As you walk up the gorge, be sure to look out up onto the many rocks, as you may see some of the agile rock wallabies as they move about. You may spot a dingo. You'll certainly see their tracks in the sand and may even hear them howling at night. There are no facilities in the park, so you will need to bring everything that you require, including water, and you'll need to take out everything that you have, including rubbish. If you are planning a trip to the Central Australia, it's easy to overlook the East MacDonald Ranges for the more well-known sites of the West MacDonalds. Ruby Gorge is a spectacular spot, offering remoteness with great camping. At the beginning of this video, I said that I'd let you know some of the tricks that we employed in producing this magazine article. Ruby Gap, as I mentioned earlier, can be very difficult to get out of if it rains heavily. Now, the day that we visited Ruby Gap, there was a very heavy cloud cover, very dark, with a forecast of rain. So we went in there and we kept a good eye on the clouds, and they got darker and darker. So although we planned to camp there, we decided that it wouldn't be safe to do so. So what we did, we set up the camp, we set up the tent, the table, and got a fire going. So it looked like we camped there, because for every magazine article that we did for Overlander at the time, you needed those campfire shots. So what I would do is get some hardwood and make a stack, and then around that put some branches, some firelighters and things like that would burn quickly, but not long enough to catch the hardwood. So in the photos you'll see a nice fire going. Well, it only burnt for a few minutes. We took all the photos, and then after setting up the camp, we pulled it all down again, and we got out of Ruby Gorge, Ruby Gap fairly quickly, and we headed to Gem Tree. Before we got there, it started to rain, and rain heavily, so we were very happy not to be in Ruby Gap at the time. Anyway, that's just one of the tricks we've got to employ when you're writing articles. It really is a great spot to visit and go to. So if you like this video and would like to see more, please subscribe and I'll do some more. I've got plenty more photos and plenty more stories where these have come from. Thanks very much.